Think Like a Champion Episode 3. Donald J. Trump. Have the right mindset for the job. When I think of work, I often see it as problem solving. I've said before that if you don't have problems, then either you're pretending not to see something or you don't run your own business. Problems come with the territory, and they should never surprise you. You should expect them. Even if you work for someone else, it's a good idea to expect problems and to be ready for them. To me, it's a realistic approach. No matter how hard you work, there are times that things happen that are out of our control. Keep your eyes on your ideals as well as reality. That's what being prepared really means. Very often when people refer to the morning of September 11, 2001, they will mention that it was a beautiful September morning in New York City. Within 2 hours, our view of a beautiful morning had been radically changed. Were we prepared for it? Could we control the outcome? That is an extreme example, but it helps to be in control of those things we can control. Every day ask yourself what problems might arise, review every project yourself, and make sure you are on top of your own agenda. Be as thorough as possible. Be alert. In business, there are no half days or slow days. If there are, something's missing. Make it your business to find out what it is, and then do something about it. Find a remedy. When I say have the right mindset, I am thinking about responsibility. People who take responsibility have no need to blame others or to be continually finding fault. These are the naysayers who never amount to much, and never manage to contribute much either. Don't join their club. They're the lowest common denominator. I knew a guy that I used to call up just to see who and what he would be blaming that day. I don't think that guy ever made a single mistake in his entire life from day one. Nothing was ever his fault. His biggest blind spot was himself, and sad to say, he eventually became a total loser because he never thought of the remedy for his many failures, himself. Look at yourself first when things go wrong. I've been in business long enough now, and have had ups and downs, so I can go from seeing the problem to seeing the solution rather quickly. Don't emphasize the problem so much, emphasize the solution. It's a mindset that works, and it's one way to accentuate the positive without being blind to the negative. Another tip for those of you who work for someone else, while you may be budding entrepreneurs, there is great value to being able to be an effective and efficient team player. If you have watched The Apprentice, you will notice that the people without team skills don't do so well. Yes, each person wants to win, but part of the game, and an important part, is to work well with your team. It's something that will be noticed in any work environment. Can you employ out-of-the-box thinking while remaining within the constraints of team effort? I've also noticed how much time the Apprentice teams spend bickering and infighting, which is not only a waste of precious time, but annoying and sometimes even embarrassing. These people are highly qualified, and to see and hear them carrying on at length, many times over inconsequential things, is a clear indication that they should heed Henry Ford's advice about finding a remedy instead of finding fault. Give your full attention to your work. I'm constantly surprised by people who don't seem to have this ability. That's why you hear me emphasizing focus so much. It's absolutely necessary in order to achieve results. Mindset includes responsibility and focus. We all know how to turn on the television set. Be equally adept at turning on your mind to matters at hand, and you might surprise yourself by what you can accomplish. Momentum is something you have to work at to maintain. Socrates lived a long time ago, but he came up with some good ones. For example, a definition of terms could be another way of saying negotiation, or it could mean the definition of a word, or simply the wisdom of being concise. But just as negotiation takes practice, so does momentum. You don't do one great deal and then think that every deal you subsequently make will automatically be great. You don't get a great rhythm going once and then think it will always be there. Even the greatest jazz musicians know there's a zone they're aiming for, and hopefully they'll get there. But they don't take it for granted that they will. They work at it every time they play. Momentum comes in different forms, but its common denominator is energy. Some synonyms are power, force, strength, impetus, and drive, all good things for accomplishments of any sort. We've all heard of biorhythms and how we have high days and low days, but my approach to that is to design your own chart and then work at maintaining it. My biorhythms are always on full speed ahead. I've developed my stamina to keep up to that level, and the results are apparent at this point. Many things become easier with practice and experience, and momentum is one of them. You can take advantage of this great energy source just by being aware that it exists. It's like swimming with the current versus being dragged down and out by a riptide. Find your own current and then go with it. Don't allow for distractions. Do everything you can to maintain your energy flow. There was a hugely successful real estate developer that I admired very much, and then he went into a decline. We saw each other at a party, and I pointedly asked him what caused this to happen. He said, "Donald, I lost my momentum, and I couldn't get it back. When this guy fell, he fell hard." I learned a great lesson from him that night, so much so that I devoted a lot of time to studying and applying the power of momentum to my own life and business. I didn't ever want that to happen to me, and I repeat the story for a reason. The lesson applies whether you're in real estate or not. I see people who get in their own way when it comes to momentum. I knew a guy who would take 10 big fast steps forward and then sit there, like he'd reached a plateau, and would expect things to just keep moving forward. It doesn't work that way. Maybe he liked the roller coaster approach to business, but he literally wore himself out before he had enough substantial success to see him through. And his ups and downs didn't work out on the balance sheet in the long run. Watch out for streaks of momentum that you can't sustain. Keep your equilibrium in all things, even in your energy output. There's a Newsweek ad from the late 80s in which they have a photograph of me with the caption, "Few things in life are as brash as Newsweek." I don't mind being called brash because to me it's being bold, it's having energy, it's getting things done. But there are constraints to be considered, and my momentum is carefully monitored. I'm not exactly brash in that sense, but I know you can't get things done if you're too timid. My persona will never be one of the wallflowers. I'd rather build walls than cling to them. Socrates said things that can make us think. So, here's another take on the quote that opened this essay. Maybe he's advising us to define our own terms. Maybe he's suggesting that we start thinking for ourselves. Maybe what he's suggesting is actually very wise advice. In that case, my advice to you regarding momentum is definitive: get yours going. Learn from setbacks and mistakes. How we handle difficult situations in life says a lot about who we are. How we view them is also an important element in how we will deal with adversity. Some events will wipe out one person but will make another person even more tenacious. That's why I always ask myself, is this a blip, or is it a catastrophe? It gives me a point of reason in the midst of bad news. You've heard me talk about passion before, how it's a necessary ingredient for success. Reason is also necessary, and when we experience setbacks and mistakes, that can be a good time to employ reason or objectivity. It also sets us up to learn something from the experience. It's like the old saying about when one door closes, another door opens. I see it as meaning there's another chance, another opportunity waiting. But we have to be open to it. I've known some people who could be staring at an open door and not even realize it's open, let alone its significance. I can remember when things turned around for me in a big way, and what I learned is that you have to maintain your focus at all times and your momentum. You've heard me mention those 2 success tips before, and this is because I learned about them the hard way. I'd lost my focus and suddenly I was faced with some setbacks. But here's another thought: your problems can be temporary if you keep your momentum moving forward. We all experience difficulties, but they can be blips if you remain positive and move on. When I decide to do something, I have enough experience to expect problems. Rarely is anything worth doing just a breeze. Sometimes I feel like Sisyphus, who was condemned to ceaselessly rolling a stone uphill, but that's just the way it is sometimes. So, I just keep going. I don't give up. My focus is intense enough to make the effort worth it, and my momentum makes sure that my efforts won't be futile. I have learned a lot because of demanding situations. One way to avoid mishandling mistakes is to realize they can happen to us every day. It's a way of being prepared without being a pessimist. Problems, setbacks, mistakes, and losses are all a part of life. It's something we have to accept. We shouldn't be shocked if and when they happen. Don't let things knock you off your feet or off your rocker either. Keep your equilibrium by knowing what you're dealing with. If you are taken by surprise, then by all means, ask yourself what you've learned from the experience. Don't just go out and make the same mistake again and hope for the best. You'll be getting a lot of the same hard knocks and tough lessons over and over again if you don't assess your situation each and every time. Here's where the going gets tricky. You have to know when to call it quits and when to keep moving forward. There's always that fine line between acceptance and resignation to think about. Sometimes it's not so fine as when you find out someone is a scoundrel and nothing's going to change them. Then it's wise to call it quits with them. Other times, we have to realize that everyone makes mistakes and to try to be a little more accepting of that fact. Just as you don't want to give up on yourself, you can't always just give up on other people either. That's where experience and discernment will come in. But what's most important is to never give up on yourself. You never know when the tide is going to turn in your favor, providing you have been paying attention and working towards something worthwhile. There was a time, early in my real estate career, when I was trying to get a deal done and I thought I'd endured and worked through every obstacle possible. Wrong. It took me 2 months more of hammering away at the details until I arrived at what was considered a done deal. Had I known what I was going to have to go through from the beginning, I'm not sure I would have had the fortitude to go for it or to stick it out. But I'm glad I did. It was my first big success, which was the renovation of the Grand Hyatt Hotel at Grand Central. Did I learn a lot? You bet I did. Every setback gave me a great lesson, and I was becoming a very educated man in the process. You have to be the same way, and you can be the same way. Just be tough, be strong, be willing to learn, and you will learn. So don't be afraid of mistakes or setbacks. They can be your learning tools on the way to building something great for yourself. We all have something to learn today. Remember that, and your chances for success will increase dramatically. Tell people about your success. I have a friend who is extremely accomplished and also extremely wealthy. Uber wealthy, as they say. But one day he called me up to see if I could get him reservations at Jean George's restaurant, and I had to ask myself, what's the point of his immense success if he can't even get a reservation in New York? The only reason he can't is because no one has ever heard about him. He's shy about using his name, to the extent that it serves him no good. He has to call other people, like me, to help him out. That got me to thinking about the toot your own horn theory, which is something I believe in. Here's a perfect example of why I believe in it. This poor rich guy might as well be just a poor guy when trying to get in the right places. The power of a name can be incredible. It can open doors like nothing else. A lot of people might have been richer than Aristotle Onassis, but when people heard the name Onassis, they knew who he was. I've mentioned before that one of the perks of being famous is being able to get restaurant reservations without any problem. My uber-rich friend has not entitled himself to very many perks. Ever notice if you introduce someone and then later add on something like, as you know, he won the Pulitzer Prize, that the reaction to the person becomes entirely different? It goes from polite to excited in no time flat. Suddenly the nobody is a somebody. Suddenly their PR power, or their buzz effect, has escalated. But unless you have someone around to toot your horn for you, you'll have to get accustomed to doing it for yourself. The well-established brand name literally speaks for itself. Some people may not even like the designs Karl Lagerfeld comes up with for Chanel, but because it says Chanel, they'll buy them, wear them, and love them. A name can speak volumes, but until you have a household name you might do well to tell people who you are and what you've done. It's a start. It's also a way of networking to find out if you might have common interests. Can you imagine if Luciano Pavarotti had been singing, contentedly, in some obscure place his whole life, what we would have missed? Or if Elton John was happy to just sing for himself in a garage somewhere? There's nothing wrong with bringing your talents to the surface. Having an ego and acknowledging it is a healthy choice. Our ego is the center of our consciousness and gives us a sense of purpose. People with no ego will have very little life force, and people with too much will tend toward dictatorial personalities. As with everything, keeping a good balance is important. Your ego can serve to keep your momentum moving forward. It can keep you vibrant and productive. It can keep your focus where it should be, which is on your work. After a while, you won't have to tell people about your success because they'll already know about it. Do not disregard your ego. It's very important to be your own best friend. As Mark Twain put it, be comfortable with your own approval. A lot of times, people will enjoy belittling your accomplishments as well as your ambitions. If you are steadfast in your self-respect, that will not even bother you because you will be able to see those people as the small fries that they are. Critics serve their own purpose, and that's fine, because you'll be smart enough to serve your own purpose, too. Think about it, if you can't say great things about yourself, who do you think will? So don't be afraid to toot your own horn when you've done something worth tooting about. Let's end with another statement from Mark Twain: I am opposed to millionaires, but it would be dangerous to offer me the position. Prescience. Prescience is a word that defines vision, foresight, creative discernment, or perception. I have often been called a visionary, but not until 2006 was I noted for having prescience. The same day as the book launch party in Trump Tower for my book with Robert Kiyosaki, Why We Want You to Be Rich, which was October 12, 2006. Was also the day the Nobel Committee announced the 2006 Nobel Prize winner in literature. What does that have to do with me? Well, I was getting calls and letters of congratulations for having the prescience to recognize the Nobel winner's talent before the Nobel Committee did. This came as a surprise to me that people would remember my letter to the New York Times in 2005 in which I mentioned the very gifted writer Orhan Pamuk as being an example of what a great writer should be. Pamuk won the Nobel Prize that day, and considering he wasn't exactly a household name, people were suddenly saying I had prescience. Sometimes we just have perceptions about certain people or things, and this was one of those times. Did I know he was going to win the Nobel Prize? No, but his talent was certainly developed enough to make him a contender, and I might have bet on it. I've written before about using your gut instincts, and sometimes that's what prescience or foresight is. It's a valuable ability, especially in business, and it's worth giving it some thought. More recently, we experienced a historic day in the financial sector. What happened on Wall Street was unprecedented, and it was rightly called the shock market in mid-September of 2008. Neil Cavuto asked me to make a comment about it, and he found footage of an appearance I'd made on his show 8 months prior to this debacle in which I'd predicted something similar happening. I had seen the indications that we might be entering a very difficult phase. Is this ESP? No, it's just paying attention on a daily basis and looking into the future a bit. That's insight and foresight working together. We all have hidden areas of expertise. I may have instincts when it comes to real estate, but I have also spent many years developing them. Your instincts may be more acute in another area. There's nothing wrong with very solid knowledge and experience to go along with our perceptions. In fact, that is when you will be playing with a very full deck. Experience, knowledge, and prescience are a formidable combination of powers. Do not underestimate any of them. The shock market. What transpired on Wall Street on September 15, 2008, is one day for the history books. I had predicted this would happen about 2 years ago and again about 8 months ago when I appeared on Neil Cavuto's show. That the landscape of Wall Street could be altered this rapidly is something we should think about. September 15, 2008, was the worst day on Wall Street since right after the 9/11 attacks, with the fallout of some financial giants that we thought were untouchable. Here's my view of this situation. We survived and prospered after September 11th, and we will do the same this time. The components are different, but I believe the government is doing the right thing with this financial mess. They have worked hard and long, but a mess is a mess. I won't equivocate on that. I saw the indications that the world was in for a tough period of time, so I can't say I'm terribly surprised. Here are some points to consider. The price of oil, which is the lifeblood of all economies, is down. That is good news. I've already written about that subject and about the many tankers full of oil treading water and going nowhere. Out of chaos comes reinvention. That can be a good thing, although it won't be easy. There appears to have been a lack of balance, and this is one way of starting something new that might be more effective. Necessity creates a place for creativity, and having the facility to implement a Plan B strategy is something everyone should strive for. I've learned that having a Plan B is common sense. We'll just have to come up with one, and it could eventually be better than what we've had. As a Manhattan real estate developer, my observation is that there will be more people looking for jobs than will be looking for apartments. That's not great news for the real estate market in New York City, but it's not dire. A lot of things are and will continue to be changing, in our country as well as around the world. There is a well-known Greek motto that I think is pertinent to today's economic situation. The sea gets sick but never dies. The Greeks have been around for a long time and they've watched the ebb and flow of history for many centuries. Remember that things are cyclical, so be resilient, be patient, be creative, and remain positive. Reinvention can be a good thing for everyone. Financial literacy. Financial literacy is financial intelligence. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, explains how he learned about money from two father figures, his poor dad and his rich dad. He had a mentor who explained how money works, and since his own father was highly educated but poor, the lessons were brought to light in a very tangible way for him. If you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad or Cash Flow Quadrant, I would suggest that you do. He has very sound advice that can make a big difference in your quality of life and your approach to money. The reason we wrote Why We Want You to Be Rich is because the more independent people become, the stronger a nation becomes as a whole. As we've noticed with the recent upheaval on Wall Street, things aren't always as solid as they seem. That calls for individual responsibility and financial intelligence. We can't rely on systems to do the work for us or expect things to fall in place because the people who are smart about money are supposedly working there. I have always been wary of the stock market. It's a gamble, but it can be lucrative, which is the lure. In short, there are no guarantees. That means being alert to national and world markets. Do your homework daily. I shouldn't need to emphasize this if you've paid attention to what's transpired in the United States from 2006 until now, which is late 2008. There was an implosion in the financial sector that was unprecedented in our history. I see it as a wake-up call. Robert and I tried to warn people back in 2006. Now I'm back to tell you loud and clear that this area of your life is of great importance. Yes, study your specific area of interest diligently, but realize that if there is no money for scholarships, whether you are studying anthropology or literature or law, you might be out of luck. Everyone will be affected. Whatever your emphasis of study is, be aware of what is going on financially around the world. We are all businessmen and women, whether you see it that way yet or not. If you like art and can't make money at it, you eventually realize that everything is business, even your art. That's why I like Warhol's statement about good business being best art. It's a fact. That's also another reason I see my business as an art, and so I work at it passionately. We all have opinions. Due diligence means finding out the difference between opinions and facts. I was astounded to find out how many people don't know how the financial world is set up. Equities, emerging markets, asset management, commodities, mutual funds, hedge funds, annuities, stocks, bonds, and mortgages should be common knowledge by the time you are in high school. That's a big oversight in our educational system. Every student should know how they all work and never expect a financial expert to give them the whole story. You have to know it yourself. This is a capitalistic society, which is good, but it also means watching out for yourself. My advice to you is to take as many finance classes as you can, no matter what your line of work is or your focus of study might be. If you're not good at economics or statistics, all the more reason to take those classes and pay attention. Having a financial blind spot is setting yourself up for some unpleasant surprises in the future. Know how the financial sector works. It affects you in every way. I heard someone say during the amazing collapse of some financial giants in the United States, that, "I'm not really interested in the market." Oh really? I was stunned. As if it doesn't affect them. When they don't have a job to go to next week, maybe they'll realize they should be interested. The ripple effect is felt everywhere, nationally and internationally, when the markets and banks falter. It shows we are all connected, whether we want to believe that or not. My emphasis here is to advise you to be financially literate. It's in your best interest in the biggest sense you can imagine. Please heed my advice and pay attention. You can start by clicking onto the finance page on Yahoo. When you go onto your computer every day, check out the markets a few times a day and see how the dollar is doing against the euro and yen. Learn to read the charts and the trends. Read the pertinent articles. That's a baby step, but it will get you thinking on the right wavelength, which could make a significant difference in your quality of life. A hungry man will realize something immediately. If he had money, he wouldn't be hungry. That's a very basic visual, but it applies. In other words, pay attention to your financial literacy. Destiny. When I was going through my mail one day, I came across a stack of letters from students in middle school about The Apprentice and the business lessons they've learned from watching it. There must have been 40 letters, so I skimmed through them, and a couple questions stood out because they were asked repeatedly. One was about how to achieve success, and the other one was how to deal with obstacles on the way to success. My first thought was how important planning ahead is to success, and how equally important it is to remain flexible with those plans. How do you tell students about the importance of plans and sticking to them while still emphasizing the necessity for flexibility? It would seem to be a contradiction. There's a quote I like by an anonymous thinker. "The bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you refuse to take the turn." That's a valuable thought for business skills as well as life skills. Very rarely does everything work out the way we hope or think it will. In fact, sometimes it works out better when you've had to take a few detours along the way, but what will help you the most is to be prepared for them. Interesting things have happened to people when they've taken side trips, planned or otherwise. I was scheduled to make a short appearance on a boat in New York City and then to get off before it took an evening-long cruise around Manhattan. The boat was full of happy and excited people, and the festivities were just starting to begin, but I had other plans in Midtown. And I was getting ready to leave when I noticed that the boat had already left the dock and was in the middle of the river. I wasn't too happy about this turn of events, but there wasn't much I could do about it except to adjust my mood and accept a cruise around my favorite city as an unexpected adventure. What happened is that I had the opportunity to talk with a variety of people while having some great ideas at the same time. New York City is beautiful when it's lit up at night, and it turned out to be a very pleasant evening for everyone. If I had perceived the situation as a misadventure, I don't think I would have had some of the creative ideas that came to me, or as much fun. This is a simple example of an unanticipated event that turned into a positive memory. I had plans that were business related that had to be changed, but it wasn't the end of the world. It was a blip, not a catastrophe. When these things happen to you, whether they be big or small events, remember that your perception of their magnitude will play a big part in what you can reap from them. We've all heard the term "go with the flow," and in my case, that's what I had to do unless I wanted to jump overboard and attempt to swim the Hudson River at night. Sometimes common sense will intervene, too. Carefully planning your way to success is a sure way to achieve your goals, and that approach should never be underestimated. Just remember that you need to be patient and persevering, and to know that there can be delays and detours along the way. I've waited 20 years to see some things happen, but it was worth the wait, and I had to change course a few times until the pieces finally fell into place. Destiny has a part to play in your life and in your business, so give it a chance to work. Each success is the beginning of the next one. That thought by Ralph Waldo Emerson has always been an inspiration to me. It gives me energy to keep going full force because I know I still have a lot to accomplish. No matter what I may have achieved or plan to achieve, I know it's a tiny matter compared to what I am capable of doing. Think about it, how can we be complacent with that kind of thought pattern going on? It would be impossible. When I hear people say things like, "It's impossible to do more," I always smile to myself and think, I've just started, and it's just a great way to feel. I'd like you to have that feeling, too, because it's like having stepping stones in all the right places just waiting for you to see them. Sometimes it helps to minimize your achievements to yourself so that you will be eager to do more. It's like saying, "Yeah, that was good, but I'm just getting warmed up," as a way to keep yourself challenged. The best achievers are those who are self-motivated, who are naturally curious, and who don't need to be told what to do next. Strive to be that kind of person. Entrepreneurs are driven by their own inner forces, and it's a great way of life as well as a great approach to life. What lies within us? Hopefully, a lot of great ideas and plans for the future, as well as the innate sense of our ability to achieve them. I think Emerson was alluding to this idea of hope in his statement. It's important for survival and it's important for success. Sometimes it is what keeps us going when the odds may not be on our side. Don't underestimate the power of some of the unseen or intangible forces in your life. Just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. The first person to give you a chance should be yourself. So, give yourself a chance every single day. Some people really are their own worst enemy. Don't fall into that abyss, because that's really what it is. Ever watched children when they are trying something new? They are excited, they are eager, and they welcome the challenge. That's an attitude to recapture or to try to emulate. The enthusiasm that discovery provides is a sure way to make sure that everything you are doing is paving the way toward your current as well as future successes. I received a letter from my kindergarten teacher, and she mentioned that what she remembers most clearly about me is that I never stopped asking questions. I wrote back to her and informed her that some things never change, that I still ask a lot of questions. But I said that it had obviously served me well, and I thanked her, belatedly, for her patience many years ago. Every one of my questions was the beginning of the next one. So, here's one for you: if you had nothing at all to do, what would you do? And after you did that, what would you do? And after you did that, what would be next on your list? I call that multi-thinking versus multitasking. Most people have at least a few things they want to do. Sometimes one thing leads to another. That's a form of discovery. Discovery breeds discovery, as in success breeds success. Questions are thoughts with a quest. Can you guess what the quest is? Knowledge. Knowledge is power. That's one reason you're reading this essay. No one is born a know-it-all. Wouldn't that be a little boring? I think it might be. Fortunately, at this time in history, things are moving so quickly that no one has the right to boredom. Just keeping up is the challenge we all have today. I like that challenge, because a challenge equals a success just waiting to happen. Let's end this with a few good questions. What lies behind you? What lies before you? What lies within you? Do you have what it takes to succeed? Do you know the full extent of your abilities yet? Do you know what the future holds for you? Do you know how your dreams will evolve? Let's admit it, life is full of mystery. That includes your life, which is no tiny matter. So don't sell yourself short on something that important. Today is just the beginning. There are times when you should move on. Sometimes we have to be patient, and sometimes we have to get moving. Wisdom is knowing which time is which and when to do what. I know, easier said than done. But we all know when we've exhausted certain possibilities, and quite possibly ourselves in the course of finding out. Wouldn't it be great to know everything first? That could save a lot of time. One way is to train your brain to do some assessing first. Do the scenario test. What if I quit this job? What would tomorrow bring? Maybe some adventures, but without a paycheck. What if I stayed in this job? The same old stuff but with a paycheck. What if I thought about a new career? A good plan, because you can stay in your job while you're working your brain towards something more challenging. Sometimes that will even open up opportunities in your present job. Do the brain work first, asking yourself a lot of questions. If, at the end of trying to make your current situation better, it is an obvious dead end, then it's a good time to move on. Maybe it's just not a good fit. It's like a relationship. On paper all the important things seem to add up, but the chemistry just isn't there to make it work in reality. Jobs can be that way, too. Just as I've hired people with terrific credentials only to find out it's simply not a good match, for them or for me. You have to cut your losses quickly. That's a good thing to learn if you want to be successful. When we hear of extremely successful people, it's usually safe to assume they've had some obstacles or difficulties along the way. There's a lot of trial and error before something is effortless or polished. Michelangelo said something worth thinking about. If people only knew how hard I worked to gain my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. The problem is, we usually only see the end result and not the process. There was a guy who was a very successful businessman, but his first passion in life was the piano. He was very dedicated and disciplined, and he achieved a certain virtuosity, but he finally realized he would never be one of the greats. In other words, he knew he would never be a Horowitz or a Gould, and he had very high standards for himself. So, he quit the piano and applied himself to business, and he became enormously successful. He just knew he should move on, and he did. He remained a musician in his private life and maintained a healthy balance for himself with his interests. He said if he'd remained a pianist, he would have been frustrated. He did a lot of thinking before he made his move, but he knew it was the right decision. It's not always easy to move on. It is leaving something behind in a way, but sometimes what's ahead will be better. We've got to do things we're suited for and hopefully that we enjoy. Success is a great feeling, and success should add to your health, not detract from it. I sometimes tell people they are not cut out to be entrepreneurs because it's true. Some people are, and some people aren't. It will save you a lot of time and hardship if you can figure that out first. As with anything, you have to see how you handle pressure and the risk factor. It's similar to going through the set of questions we had at the beginning of this essay. Learn to scrutinize yourself and your capabilities, and find the time for some thought-provoking thinking. As Confucius said, learning without thought is labor lost. Don't let that apply to you. Learn, work, and think in equal proportions, and you'll be going in the right direction. Thank you for your supporting our channel. Please subscribe to get more benefit videos.